Hello and welcome, Valiant here, and this is my Atal'Dazar healing guide. In the background you will see my plus 19 Atal'Dazar that I did with a random pug that we ultimately 2-chested. We immediately go for the first boss in the dungeon, Resin, a large T-Rex that pats around the bottom courtyard. You will notice small purplish bone mounds on the ground. You do not want to touch those, as you will spawn smaller T-Rex bone babies that you really don't want to have to deal with. Because of this, we tank him on the side of the room. For us as healers, there really only are 3 things for us to look out for. Number 1, serrated teeth. This is a nasty bleed on the tank that needs to be either dispelled or healed through. I was lucky to have a geared warrior tank on this run that does quite well against bleeds, as it is considered physical damage. The second thing to look out for is what is happening to our warlock friend here. Resin fixates on one player, who then have to put as much distance as possible between them and the boss. Our buddy here was too close and got caught, and Resin starts munching on them. As you can see, he's taken a lot of damage and have to unload heals on him to keep him alive. On tyrannical weeks, this will very likely kill someone if they are caught. The last piece for us to be mindful of is terrifying visage, which requires the entire group to line of sight the boss, or you will be feared and start running around and very likely run into those bone mounds I spoke about previously. If this happens to anyone in the group, you have to be super quick to dispel them to avoid spawning too many of these baby dinosaurs. These little toxic saurid guys actually hurt quite a bit. They leap on a player and does a substantial amount of cleave damage when they land. Your group needs to be spread out with these ones. If you find yourself in a group with only melee DPS, pray to whatever deity you subscribe to and hope they use defensives. Now here's where the tank deviates from the route I am accustomed to. I normally go to the right here, so this is my first experience with this side of the dungeon. I will show you the other side a bit later in this video when we reach the priestess boss. But for now, let me tell you that this side is absolutely insane with the amount of damage that gets pumped out. So make sure you have CDs that you can cycle through. Don't pop them all on the first pack here either, as there are 4 in total. You will need all of them to get through it. The stalkers will stun one of the players for 3 seconds, and if that player happens to be standing in bad, you will have to pump a lot of heals into them. This can be dispelled though, so keep an eye out for that. The honor guard should be the priority target here, as they are unkillable until the totem they spawn is killed. Once the totem's dead, it enrages the guard and he starts throwing around these nasty green puddles everywhere. This is where the damage profile really ramps up, and we have to be prepared for it. The guards also cast Rending Maul on the tank, and it stacks. Once this gets up to about 3 or 4 stacks, it will really start chunking down your tank. Make sure you're prepared for it. The Witch Doctors cast a range spell that just hurts and should be interrupted as much as possible. The bigger issue for us is they cast Unstable Hex, which reduces an ally's movement speed by 30% when it expires. If you're close to other players when it expires, it will spread to all surrounding players. For Holy Paladins, Blessing of Freedom is an excellent use here, as well as Mistweaver's Tiger's Lust. Now to the second boss, Volcall. He doesn't have that many abilities, but the ones he has do hurt. What is of note here is that your DPS allies will be split apart in order to do damage to the 3 totems on the platform. These totems need to die at roughly the same time in order to trigger phase 2. This means that we as healers likely need to remain towards the center of the room to ensure we have the range needed. If you're an evoker, I just feel bad for you, as this is your absolute nightmare. First, he will use Toxic Leap and jump onto a player which does cleave damage. Not too bad considering everyone is going to be spread out to begin with. Noxious Stench on the other hand is deadly. It does an intense amount of group-wide damage that we need to be prepared for. It can be interrupted though, so be a helpful ally and interrupt it if you're in a position to do so. This goes on until the totems are killed and triggers phase 2. In phase 2, the tank should slowly kite the boss at the outside of the room. The boss will continuously erupt with these green pools of death, so watch your feet. He will also continuously cast Noxious Stench, so be prepared with interrupts. This is an intense phase, where a lot of damage can go out if your allies are not mindful of their feet and the tank kites the boss correctly. I find staying towards the center of the room works pretty good, as it minimizes the puddles spawn near the tank and melee DPS. We quickly kill another pack of the same mobs we encountered before, and we're now in the center part of the dungeon. We still have these small Saurid dinos to contend with, but they also added a Sky Screamer in here. These guys are nothing special other than we need to make sure their terrifying screech is interrupted. If it goes through, it will cause a fear, so be prepared to dispel if that happens. The two big boys in the middle here should be avoided at all times. They are very strong and take a long time to kill, so don't waste your time on them. We finally make our way over to this pack, which has two augurs included in it. They cast Fiery Enchant and needs to be interrupted at all times. If you fail to do so, it will spawn a bunch of fire puddles on the ground, and if the group is not quick enough to move out of it, it will do a tremendous amount of damage to the party. All the other enemies in this group we have discussed earlier. After this group has been killed, we make our way up the staircase and we encounter yet again a very large group of enemies, most of which we've already seen except for a new one, the Juggernaut. Whenever there's a Juggernaut in the group, you're going to want to stay spread out as much as possible. He casts a spell called Merciless Assault, which targets the player that is furthest away from him and then charges towards them. This does an insane amount of AoE damage to the people stacked up together if it hits. You can avoid this charge if you're fast enough to move away, and I also know there are some areas you can stand to bug him out so he doesn't do it at all. Outside of this, if the augur is not interrupted, there'll be bad stuff on the ground and people will probably be standing in it. But now it's boss time. This priestess has some really cool mechanics and was just recently buffed now that we entered Tyrannical Week. Periodically throughout the fight she will hit the tank very hard with her Gilded Claws attack. Be prepared in case the tank is low or is not properly using their active mitigation. Once she puts this buff up, her melee swings do 300% more damage to your tank. If you are able to purge enemy buffs, make sure you use it on Gilded Claws. Also, Warlocks might want to try to use Curse of Weakness on her to slow down her attack speed when this is up. She will also cast Molten Gold on a random player, which you need to dispel as soon as possible, as it does a lot of damage if it stays on too long. Other than this, make sure the ad gets killed as soon as possible, and we as a healer should try to help with any CC or stun we have to prevent it from reaching the blood pools that spawn on the platform. About 5 seconds before she casts Transfusion, you should find your way over to one of these pools. When the transfusion cast goes off, she will channel a spell to steal your blood to heal herself. Well, if you have tainted blood, it will instead do significant amount of damage to her. If everyone in your group did it correctly, she will effectively reduce her own health by between 40 to 50% during the fight. As you can see, transfusion does a lot of group-wide damage, so make sure you're prepared for it when it goes off. Now is a good time to go over the alternative route to get to this boss, which has some very dangerous enemies along the way. We've already discussed the Augur and the Juggernaut, both of which you will see in this clip where we did nothing right and almost wiped off the bat. But we have a new enemy here, the big Colossus golem looking thing. He is here purely to provide us healers additional ways of getting heart attacks. He will randomly target a player and cast Soul Burn. This is a channeled spell that does an insane amount of damage to that player, but it also slows them for 30%. Now you better believe that Blizzard set this up to coincide with the Fiery Enchant ability from the Augur, so that if it's not interrupted, the player with Soul Burn is likely going to get caught in the fire and take a substantial amount of damage and probably die. If you are a Paladin, you use Blessing of Freedom, and if you're a Mistweaver, you use Tiger's Lust on them, to at least remove the movement impairing effect. After this pack gets killed, there's another set of them at the top of the stairs to the left here. Be super careful with that pack, since you have limited space, and be careful with line of sight issues with the staircase. Once that pack is killed, you go up another set of stairs and you arrive at the Priestess boss. We make our way across the center platform again, making sure we do not pull the two big boys in the middle, and we reach the last boss of the dungeon, Yasma. When she reaches full energy, she will cast Soul Rend, which attempts to rip everyone's soul out from them. When this happens, you have a few seconds to move away from the boss and try to stack together, as all the souls will spawn will need to die before they reach the boss. When these souls spawn, there will be an intense amount of group buy damage, so make sure you are prepared for it. The tank will take a large hit from her called Skewer, and they are well advised to use some form of CD or make sure that their active mitigation is stacked and ready to go. Just keep an eye on the tank when this goes off. If he is unprepared and not using CDs or mitigation, this will hurt. And if he's not topped off, it could potentially kill him. Whenever she casts Rack and Pain, it is very important it gets kicked. It does a significant amount of damage to whomever it targets. This was buffed coming into Tyrannical Week, and at the plus 20 key level, it will deal roughly 450k upfront damage and apply a dot that does over 200,000 damage taken every 2 seconds. There are very few healers out there that will be able to cope with this without substantial assistance, which means making sure it gets interrupted is of paramount importance. If it does go off and you have a curse dispel, you need to be super quick to remove it. Last but not least are these purple spiders on the platform. Every once in a while you will see them get empowered by getting bigger and glow more purple. If you get hit by these, as you will see me doing, it will almost one-shot you. A Paladin or Hunter can pop their immunities and clear them out, which is probably something to consider for Tyrannical Weeks. As you noticed throughout this entire fight, I failed miserably at these spiders. I failed damn near every time they got empowered, and eventually they got me and killed me. Just goes to show, your movement is very important in this fight, and your understanding of your surroundings is equally as important. That is it for this healing guide. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please hit that like button, comment below if I missed anything, and most importantly, please subscribe to the channel. I will be creating these types of videos for all of the dungeons this season. Thank you for watching.